Easy guys, Dom here from Cringy Dad Gaming. So in this video we're going to be talking about the up and coming open world MMO titled New World. This is coming from Amazon Games and is launching at the end of August 2021. Now I was fortunate enough to get an early beta key sent to me by the developers, so thank you very much for sending that over to me. So my experience in the game so far consists of probably around 25 hours, and with that amount of time spent in the game, I probably haven't really got into the meat of the game. You're probably going to be asking yourself, really, after 25 hours, Dom, you're not really even into the meat of the game? Well, not really, because this type of game has so much to do, so much leveling up, and the map is pretty big. And within that map itself, you've got a lot of different areas to unlock, and a lot of these areas are going to be pretty much too high a level for you to really survive in. You're going to go into some of these areas and find that some of the enemies are going to be extremely high levels and very hard for you to kill, especially if you're on your own. And playing this game on your own is something I'm going to be discussing about in this game, because I tend to play a lot of games solo. I don't really have any friends who play these type of games, you know, this genre. So for me, rolling as a solo, even though it does say on Steam that you can play it solo, well, sometimes I was coming up against a few issues with that, but I'll discuss that later on in the video. First thing I want to talk about really in the game itself is the overall look and feel of the combat. Now, I think the game looks really, really good. I'm pretty much running this on the high settings, and I do like how you can remove the HUD and stuff like that, so you can kind of get some nice screenshots and maybe a little bit of gameplay. Although, with MMOs, I tend to find I really don't like all the clutter on the screen. You've got like different chat settings on the left, all your quests coming up on the right, although you can switch these off, and I did like that. I did like how you can unpin quests in your journal and you can mute the chat if you want to. So that was helpful for someone like me, because when you're in large combat areas with a lot of other players, you've got all the player names popping up, you've got all the health bars from the enemies, all the different magical effects from people's weapons and staffs and things like that on the screen, and it really can get pretty full on, and stuff like that for me actually gives me a little bit of a headache. Maybe that's just me because I'm getting a little older nowadays, and you know, I just want a more clean looking game. So having those options in there to be able to adjust the way the game looks in terms of its overall graphic settings and just what your overall UI is pretty good. Although I probably would like to see some more options added to be able to, you know, change the sizing of maybe some of the HUD, or maybe even being able to rearrange the HUD on the screen itself to, you know, be in a position which would be more comfortable for you and how you want to do it, especially for people like streamers who could probably, you know, clean up and move around some of the UI a little bit. But that's nothing really major. But overall, the game looks fantastic, and each different area of the map has kind of a different look and feel to it, be it from more of an autumn feel right through to kind of like wintry, picturesque locations. And you're going to be spending a lot of time out in the world doing a lot of different quests and gathering resources. Now, for me, this is probably where the game got a little bit tedious for me, if I'm honest. When you get a lot of these different faction quests and town quests, they started getting a little bit stale for me early on, because they were quite samey after a while. You know, go to this farm and look through these boxes and find a different item like a compass or a map or intel or whatever, and it pretty much was running back, handing it in, taking another quest on from your faction, so you can level up your faction points to be able to unlock special faction weapons and armor and things like that, which is pretty cool. But I did find that those quests started getting a little bit stale for me and a little bit boring quite quick. You know, go and hunt these amount of elk, go and hunt these amount of wolves and bring their pelts back, and that for me was just started feeling like a little bit fetch questy, if I'm honest. It just felt like it's quite padded out, and a lot of the quests will be like that. Early on in the game, you're going to have to go out and mine an awful lot of resources to be able to craft different items in the game, and there's so many different things you can craft, and I did find that the crafting system is quite in depth but also relatively straightforward to understand, because it will explain in the crafting when you're in one of these towns or at your makeshift camp the items that you need to craft. But actually finding these items in the world can actually be a little bit difficult until you figure out where they are. Now, the game, as you level up with your crafting and gathering, will help you by allowing you to track the location of where a lot of these resources are, using the little compass at the top of the screen, by adding little images on there when you're near a specific animal or a specific resource that you're trying to mine. But you won't actually unlock these until you reach some of the higher levels within, you know, the gathering mechanics of the game. So for a lot of people early on in the game, they're probably just going to be going out and just like literally mining rock and chopping down trees and gathering simple, you know, kind of like flowers and fruits and things like that to be able to level that skill up, which is going to make things so much easier. But early on for me in the game, when I wasn't aware of that, I found it quite difficult to find where, say, iron ore was. And not necessarily just because there wasn't any in the world, but this is where kind of some of the flaws with MMO games come into effect. Because you've got so many people playing on a server and they're all trying to do the same thing. They're going to these, I don't know, say an iron ore deposit, and they're mining it all, and then they're moving on. And some of these deposits take a while to spawn back in, but it's easy to miss the location of where they are. Yes, the game does leave like kind of little remnants of where these things are if you know what to look for. But if you don't, you're going to be running around scratching your head, getting quite frustrated trying to find these resources, which is probably going to slow down the progression of being able to level up these skills. Leveling up skills itself is just as simple as, you know, general combat and, you know, exploring the world. You'll not only level up your skills within being able to, you know, upgrade things like your strength and constitution, focus and things like that to, you know, make your character more powerful, but you'll also unlock specific mastery levels for your different types of weapons you're using, be that if it's just going to be a good old hack and slash sword and shield, or if it's going to be, you know, magical items. And you can unlock and use up to 3 special moves for each of these different weapon types. Once you start using them, you will have to use them extensively to be able to level them up and unlock all of the available buffs for these particular weapon types. And these special moves do come at a cooldown. The overall combat does kind of feel like it would in any of these type of third-person MMOs in terms of just generally getting involved in the combat. Once you've got used to a particular weapon and you like it, you're probably going to find that the combat feels very samey. You're going to get to a point where you're going to know a particular enemy's moveset, and for me it started getting a little bit kind of tedious again with the combat, because it was just the same rinse and repeat kind of moves I was using, you know, kind of dodge, use your shield, use your special move, wait for them to hit 2 times before you know they're going to stand still for a second. It was that kind of thing. So for me, the combat started getting a little bit stale, and also some of the enemy types that you're going to be finding in the world, because you're going to be spending such a long time within one particular area. The enemy types, although they are, you know, different throughout the whole map, in one specific area of the map, you're going to be finding there's a lot of these samey type enemies. And as you start leveling up, some of these enemies are going to get relatively easy. I guess for a solo player like me, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you can just run through the area you want and sometimes even be able to avoid some of these enemies completely. Now, I say run through an area, you're going to be doing an awful lot of running in this game, because there are no mounts in the game as it stands, although I know some people have been asking for them. Me personally, I think they need to be added. I know there's a lot of people saying no, they shouldn't be added, and I've seen quite a lot of negativity online from some people saying that, you know, mounts, you know, they're a kiddies thing and they shouldn't be in the game. Well, to be honest with you, there's no different seeing someone ride past on a horse to seeing someone run past on foot. And yes, there are fast travel points within the game, but you can't use these fast travel points until you've actually found them. You can't fast travel to a particular town or other location until you've actually uncovered it. And that means you're going to have to run quite a long way. And along the way, when you run into these places, The world's filled with annoying enemies like wolves and lynxes and things like that, which just pretty much just always chase you and get in your way, and you have to stop and fight them. And for me, that also got a little bit tedious. It felt like I was being forced into combat while I was trying to do something else, while I was trying to stay focused on something else. It'd be nice just to be able to, you know, jump on a horse and travel to these locations a little bit faster. I don't know if that's Amazon Games' way of padding out the game to try and make it feel like it's lasting for longer and make you play for longer. But for me, yeah, it's something that they need to address. Once you've unlocked a fast travel point, you can fast travel as long as you've got the right potions, which it's like called an Azath potion or something like that. Is it Azath potion? What's it fucking called, mate? I can't remember. These Azoth potions, which allow you to use the fast travel points, and unless you've done a few missions early on to be able to accrue some of this Azoth, you'll probably find that you won't be able to use the fast travel points. But if you check into the inn at a particular town that you're in, then you can fast travel back to the town by just literally clicking on the town on the map and then choosing to fast travel to inn. Although they've got a cooldown timer of an hour on it, which is pretty rubbish, if I'm honest. That needs to be a lot shorter than that, because like some of these missions are so far away. It's literally run there, fetch this, run back. And that takes up a huge amount of time. Like, once I've got to a mission and done it, I just want to get back and hand it in and move on. Don't want to be fannying around with having to run through loads of different woods and fields, getting stopped by wolves and all sorts of different annoying enemies on the way back. Do you know what I mean? So that for me is something that feels like it needs to be tweaked a little bit in the game. And I think just by adding mounts, it can just bypass a lot of that. Either that or just let people fast travel if they want to. Why does it really matter if they want to get back to the town quick to hand their quest in? Why should that be put behind a timer? Now, the fast travel shrines, they should be marked on the map as a location where you've got an idea of where they are. But, you know, yeah, okay, so you may still have to go and unlock them. But, like, knowing where they are on the map, even if it's just they show up when you're in a vicinity of one, like when you're close to one, it shows up on the compass. Like with it does in things like Skyrim, if you're quite close to a location that you haven't actually uncovered yet, but it will show up as a different icon. I think something like that needs to be added in the game for those, because fast traveling in this game is something that just needs a little bit of work, in my opinion. Now, one thing I did find with this, and I know it's something that happens in a lot of MMOs, is the way the enemies react and spawn within a certain area. There's going to be enemies, you're going to kill them, and there's going to be a spawn timer on them before they spawn back in. And getting that right in this type of game can be quite difficult, because there's a lot of players in the world all trying to do similar things to you. And if you've killed all the enemies and they come along, there's no enemies for them to kill. And I think that can cause the game to get a little bit boring for people. But one thing I did find was, as a solo player, that I'd be going to one particular area to do a mission, and I'd kill a couple of enemies, which would probably take me a little while because I'm playing on my own. And just as I'd probably killed the last enemy, all the others had spawned back in behind me and just like literally overwhelm me with how many there are. And that started getting a little bit frustrating in places for me. I don't know if there's any real way of being able to combat that, to be honest with you. This is where the solo play is not very solo friendly in this game. But also found that it worked the other way sometimes. There was one mission I was doing where I had to go and kill this bear, and someone had just killed the bear just as I arrived, and I had to wait probably about 10-15 minutes for it to respawn back in. Like, I'm just stood around like with my thumb up my ass, like what else can I do at that point? Like, because if I run off and do something else, it's going to happen again. And I felt that was a little frustrating, and that happened a few times in a few different locations in the game. Another thing that also annoyed me a little bit, and I know you know the Elder Scrolls Online suffered from this the same. If you're fighting a relatively difficult enemy, maybe because they're a lot higher level than you, but you think you can take them because you've got badass skills, but you've moved out of their respawn area a little bit too much, all of a sudden they retreat and their health goes right back up to full, and that is really frustrating as well. I don't think that should be a mechanic in the game. I think, like, if that enemy's decided to come and fight you, it should stick with you until you've killed it, regardless of if it's outside of its respawn area. I think there needs to be some sort of development with that. I'm sure, you know, the game's developers can code it in a way that these enemies, once they're engaged with you, will continue to fight until they're dead. Because you just get the enemy down to nearly dead, but you've moved a little bit too far away, and then you lose all your work. You know, you're gonna have to then go back and kill them again. Although sometimes you know, you don't want to fight some of these enemies, you just want to run past them and get something else done. So sometimes that is maybe a godsend for some people, but for me, the whole way that the enemies kind of respawn, their respawn times in certain areas, and how quick some of the main enemies, like, you know, the quest enemies and things like that, spawn in, definitely needs tweaking. Now, the game does have a lot of content for you to be getting your teeth into. Some of it is a little tedious, like I've already mentioned early on, but some of it is pretty cool. You've got some cool little distractions like fishing, and, you know, again, some of the early fishing missions, going off and having to catch certain things like the snail and the clam, for example, which I'm sure any of you who've played it understand what I'm talking about there, doesn't always necessarily explain to you how and where you're going to find these particular types of fish when you're fishing. And the one that comes up where you have to find a hot spot. I mean, if you just search around the map, you're going to find these fishing locations, and, you know, you can find different types of baits and stuff like that to help you catch better fish. And I did like the fishing, but again, I just felt some of the quests early on weren't necessarily explained very well on how you need to do these things, and they might want to attach some mini tutorials to these things rather than just a couple of cryptic clues from some of the NPCs that are giving you the quest. I guess that leaves room for tutorials on YouTube, and I've already made a few YouTube tutorials explaining a few of these things that I struggled to understand early on just to help people, but they shouldn't have to leave the game and search YouTube for these things. It's so simple just to put a little extra bit of information within the kind of mission journal information for you to be able to understand. You're going to not have to worry about fishing in a specific location to catch, say, the snail. As long as it's fresh water, you're all good, and because you just don't know where to go sometimes to have to do these things. You think, is there a specific location where I have to catch this particular thing on the map? Is there a specific bait I need to use? It doesn't explain it. Yeah, because it doesn't explain it probably means you don't have to, but I'm one of these people where, you know, I ask the questions if they've not been explained properly because I want to know exactly how it's supposed to be done down to the T. Another place where I found that I was struggling as a solo player was when we came to the first dungeon mission. Now, it does say on the Steam page, you know, clearly when you look at the information on there about the game that, you know, you can play it solo, you know, but it's not going to work, unfortunately, once you get to the point where you need to go into these dungeons, because these dungeons are locked behind a limit of having to have at least 3 players to be able to get into them. And to be able to enter these dungeons, you will have to have a tuning orb. Now, you will get a tuning orb to be able to do your first expedition into a dungeon just from following the main quest once you've got your Azov staff, which was also a little bit of a chore putting together. But, you know, I got to the Amarine excavation expedition and thinking, you know, I was going to be able to go in there on my own. And it said minimum 3 players. I'm like, okay, so I'm Billy No Mates. I play on my own. I'm screwed now. I can't progress the main story. That for me was frustrating straight away. The game at this point, and I'm hoping they're going to add it in at a later time, has no matchmaking when you get to these dungeons. For solo players to be able to just look for randoms to play the game with and progress, that's what they need to add into this. They need to add the option to be able to do it there, because I don't want to run around the world having to try and find people who are wanting to do the same thing. Now, I was just lucky that waiting around outside the entrance to this for 10 minutes, people showed up and I was able to use the in-game chat and say, look, you know, I can't do this on my own. Does anyone want to do it with me? And I managed to get a group of randoms together to be able to do it. But one, that's forcing me to be social with people, you know, by using the chat, which I don't really like doing. And I know that sounds like I'm a miserable old fart, but it's not. It's just I was brought up not to talk to strangers. And it's the same in the game world. I don't speak to people I don't know, really. I'm not using the voice chat. I'm not using the in-game text chat. I don't want to be really having to do that. Although once I've played the actual dungeon. I could see where the benefits were of having a group, because we had, one guy was healing us, another guy with a different set of abilities. I was playing more of a tank role, with heavy armor and heavy weapons and things like that. So I get that there's an MMO thing where you've got a group of 4 and all your abilities kind of work together. And I never would have been able to have done the dungeon on my own with how difficult it was. And I kind of get that you have to have that group. That's fair enough. All right, so I'm forced to go from a solo player experience to play in a group of 4 to do these dungeons. But at the same time, there needs to be an easier matchmaking system for me to be able to do it, because I felt totally cock-blocked when I got to that point. And for me, it was a little bit annoying and a little bit frustrating. But I guess up to this point, I've kind of been relatively talking more about the bad and the ugly side of the game, but not necessarily the good. But the game does have so much good in it. There is so much fun to be had here. And I had so much fun within the game. The crafting is, like I said, really fun and in-depth. And trying to craft yourself better weapons and armor and get more powerful so you can take on a lot more of the different enemy types you're going to come across in the world, and be able to progress those other areas of the map that are more difficult is something for you to strive towards in the game, giving you a sense of kind of progression and making your character feel more powerful as you progress. The game does have basic character creation where you can create your own kind of character with their own look and gender being male or female, and maybe it would be good for them to give more options within the area of character customization to be more up to date with where we're at nowadays, with things like people's gender, but also with how the looks of your characters are. Again, they give you, a set of generic kind of looking faces to use. You can't change the body types, the height and things like that. You can't change your facial features. And I think with things like MMOs, RPGs, that sort of thing, having in-depth character creation is something that is quite a powerful tool, and a lot of people really do like that, to be able to get their own kind of online persona across. So as much as it was easy to use, I think that's also an area that probably needs some work. There's me saying I was going to go into the good stuff, and now I'm moaning about something else. Holy shit. But you know what I'm saying? It's just, these are things, that are kind of racing through my mind just at this moment as I talk about the game. But I mean, you can start, 4 different characters and play on, these different kind of server worlds, so to speak, so you can maybe mix up your gameplay to try out different things, up to 4 different characters. But, I'm just going to really concentrate on progressing one character and trying to max out the level and try and see what the game has in the end game, because like I said, I was getting a little bit kind of fed up with certain quests early on. I'm just hoping that when you open up new areas and kind of start doing quests for them, they're not going to be exactly the same, because for me, that's going to get a little bit boring. But I think these dungeons was where the fun was at for me, personally. I think creating the tuning orbs maybe is a little bit grindy, the stuff you need to be able to find to make these tuning orbs, which is how you get in to these expeditions in these dungeons. But I think if they can add a lot more of these types of missions into the game, rather than just going out and fetching stuff from a farm, searching 7 different boxes or digging up soil to be able to bring back to the the guy in the town who wants to check the soil samples, which took me forever to find where this soil was in the game, because it wasn't really well marked when I was doing the quest. I think moving away from those types of quests and adding more of the exploration of things like dungeons, with a lot more focused combat on different enemy types, I think that's what the game needs for someone like me to stay more interested. I did like exploring the world and finding new stuff, but I don't personally want to be out there mining the same rocks for hours on end just to level up my mining skill. I don't want to be going to try and find specific flowers to be able to level up, the skills of like gathering different plants, because as I said earlier, there's so many other players trying to do the same thing in the world that you can't always find what you need, and it really slows your progress down. I think things like the leveling on certain skills need to be tweaked a little bit for that reason. But my overall impressions of the game so far are positive. I know you probably don't think that from what I've talked about, but it's very easy to talk about things that need to be changed in a game and things that could be done better, because I want this game to be an enjoyable experience for me and anyone else who's playing it. Just because I feel this way about these things doesn't mean everyone's going to agree with me, you know, because we've all got our own opinion on what we like, and that's fair enough. But I think getting a good balance, you know, to make everyone happy in this game is really, really important. Now, I didn't really talk too much about the PvP in this video, and that's because I'm not personally a PvP player. I'm not really into that side of thing in this type of game. I just found that for me in this type of game, it's not really the type of thing I want to get into, but there is PvP there for people who want a PvP, be that big 20v20 kind of battles down to just smaller one-on-one duels. I like the option of how you can turn dueling off so people can't come up and bug you and try and fight you all the time. Now, one thing I will probably end on at this point in the video is just talking about the general connectivity of the game and how it run. Now, for me, the game run fine. It was running at over 60 frames per second on the maximum settings when I was playing the game, and I only really noticed frame rate issues when I entered a town, and that was pretty horrible at times when there was a lot of people in the town area. And I did find that turning down how many nameplates you see on players when you're close by that I mean, you know, the names that are above people's heads, by turning that right down to the lowest setting of I think 2, that kind of helped a little bit with the frame rates in some of these towns. I didn't have one disconnect while I was playing the game at all, but one thing I did notice is after there'd been a server restart due to maintenance, there were some pretty long waiting times to be able to get in the queues. I really don't like that sort of thing, and I'm just really hoping that they're going to probably be able to speed up how quickly you can actually get into the game. I don't know if they're going to be able to figure out a way to be able to do that. Who knows? Let's just hope they don't start charging people for VIP access and queue jumping, because that will be quite frustrating if they do that. But the overall connection to the server seemed to be okay, although I did notice that the server ping was pretty much all over the place. There was points where the EU servers would be, you know, around 70 milliseconds, which is okay, but there was times where it was way over 200 milliseconds, and I live in the UK, and my server connection to an EU server shouldn't be over 200 millisecond ping. That's like connecting to a server somewhere else in the world. It's just hope that they can kind of get that balanced out a little bit so there's no kind of latency or lag from the server and desync and stuff like that. But, you know, I think the game is shaping up to be a strong MMO. It's definitely one of the better ones that I've played in a while. So I'm really excited to see what Amazon do with this game in the future. Yes, there's definitely room for improvement, but there always is in games. But I think what they've got there at the moment is enough to keep people interested early on. But are they going to be able to keep players in the late game with kind of how tedious some of these missions get? Let me know in the comments your feelings on it, what you think. You know, do you agree with me on anything? Do you disagree with me on anything that I've said in the video? Then obviously sound off in the comments section and let me know. But let's just keep it civil in there, guys. I am going to be covering New World a lot more as the game, you know, builds to its release on the 31st. There is probably only a few days left on the beta at the moment before they're going to have a period of being able to reflect on the feedback and hopefully implement some positive changes before its final release. But once they've got the game out there, I'll be featuring a lot more content from the game on my channel. So don't forget to smash the subscribe button and smack that like button really hard for more future content on New World. So I'll catch you guys on another video, and thanks for watching.